Hello, everybody. We're going to get started so that we keep the afternoon flowing on time. I'm Kim Bergman, and I am going to be moderating this panel. I'm going to mostly stay out of the way because it's the parents whose interesting stories I know you guys want to hear. So come on in, everyone, and we'll get started. A couple of housekeeping items for today. For this session in particular, we ask that you not videotape. We know some of you have been videotaping with your phones, which is fine at times so that you can retain information. But this particular panel is slightly sensitive in that the laws about surrogacy and doing surrogacy in New South Wales are intricate, and so we would prefer that you not put any of that on tape today. Okay, so let's get started. Come on in and sit down. All right, so I'm going to introduce this wonderful panel of dads, and then I'm going to let them speak a bit about their stories, and then we're going to open it up to question and answers because that will, I'm sure, spark some interesting conversation. Little reminder for the people just coming in now, we're going to ask that you not videotape this session, and I'll just call you out if you do so. If you didn't hear that, if you came in after I say it. So there we go. All right. So we have here Mark Dodd, who had his child through surrogacy in Thailand. Mark and his partner Matt from Adelaide have 2 children born through surrogacy. Their children were carried by 2 different surrogates with the same egg donor and sperm from each of the dads. And they were delivered on the same day in early 2014. So basically twins from 2 different bodies. Philip, next to him, and Eric began their journey in Los Angeles in August 2012. They were introduced and matched with their surrogate Karen a few months later in December. And a few months later in December, Growing Generations and HRC Fertility guided Philip and Eric, Karen, and their egg donor every step of the way. I did not write this, by the way. I'm just reading what was sent in. One embryo was fertilized by Eric, the other by Philip. Karen fell pregnant with twins on their first attempt. And Ilana and Eden were born in California in December 2013. So twins in the same body. Twins from 2 different bodies, twins in the same body. Okay. You guys can talk more about that in a bit. That'll be interesting. And Brendan is an Australian parent through the U.S., had a child in California, and he will share his story himself. So why don't we start with Mark, and if you could just speak for a couple minutes about your adventure, and we'll go down the line, and then we'll open it up to everybody.
Okay, so yes, so as we said in the introduction, we went through Thailand, which is now no longer an option, of course. But hopefully there's still some use in talking about those journeys due to some similarities with the countries that are now available. So with our journey, we did a lot of research online, and then we just went, as fast as we could. We started planning in January 2013, flew over to Thailand in April, and we had the kids born in January 2014. So it took 1 year total, including everything. And what we actually did is we had an Australian egg donor who was flown over to Thailand, and we had these 2 surrogates these 2 wonderful surrogates who carried out children for us. With each surrogate, they implanted only 1 embryo. We did the single embryo transfer for the reasons that have been often discussed at this conference in some of the earlier sessions. So we were very lucky, implanting only a single embryo, that we did end up with 2 successful pregnancies on the first try, and our wonderful children were delivered on the same day because it was elective cesarean, so it wasn't that much chance. In Thailand, around 90% of the deliveries are elective cesarean, so they delivered them on the same day in January 2014. And they're now 16 months old, and toddlers running around.
Thank you. Philip?
Okay, so my partner and I, we decided to go via the States. We did a lot of research looking at India, Thailand, and all the options available to us. And we decided to go with America because we just wanted, as much hassle-free journey as we could. We'd heard lots of horror stories from people all over the world, so we decided that the States was the best option for us. So, similar to Mark, our journey was very, very quick. We were very lucky to have no issues at all along the way. So I was in America for my cousin's wedding, and we decided to go to Growing Generations, and we got the whole process going. That December, we were back again to meet our surrogate, to do our own little donation, and come the following April, we had transferred 2 embryos into our surrogate. So we divided the embryos in half, and half were fertilized with my partner and half with mine, put them in, and we were very, very lucky that they took. And 8 months later, we had 2 twins. Again, it was a very, very positive experience for us. We wanted our surrogate to be a very intricate part of our children's lives. And when they were born in December, we were in the States for 3 weeks, all in all. We had the passports, and we were back in Australia to start our life with our family. So I don't really have anything more to say than it was a really, really good journey and experience for us.
Great.
Yeah. My partner and I, Mona, we started off in India in 2011, and we tried 2.5 times. Almost 3. So we were unsuccessful in the first attempt, and we had a sort of a negative experience in the second attempt. We were very demoralised. Where the issue why we didn't go to America in the first place was money. So I borrowed some money from my parents, and then and they said yes, of course, and so that opened up America for us. We also had a very positive experience in the US. I guess from the contrast with the Indian experience was refreshing for us. There was great uncertainty, greater transparency. We used the separation between the clinic and the surrogate and the agency was open. They used things like escrow agencies to hold your money. So it was all very transparent. So I guess the most unique thing about our journey was that we wanted to use a known egg donor. I know that sort of people have spoken about that known egg donors are the preference, but certainly when we started looking, certainly maybe it's the donor agency, they said you can ask, but the assumption seemed to be that people would want to have an anonymous donor, and because we did a lot of research before we entered into this, we were very adamant that we wanted to have a known donor. So as it turned out, most egg donors were very happy to at least consider on paper that to be known to the child at some stage. So we spoke to quite a few of them on Skype, and we went round in a circle, and we ended up choosing the first egg donor that we'd actually rejected for another reason, medical reason, but then we decided no one's perfect. So I guess the hardest thing about that wasn't actually making the informal agreement, was the legal the document, the contract between us and the donor, which would permit that being known. So these as our experience, there are pretty much just a template, and they have the template and they fill in your name and their name. The template is for an anonymous donor, and and I think the reason for that is all the legalities of the California system are for a anonymous donation. This is my understanding from our experience. So we basically made the arrangement for a known donation to be done just with a few paragraphs in the existing document. So we don't know how that's going to turn out. Whether so we've arranged that our child can meet before her 18th birthday. So whether we're just trying to work through what kind of relationship that we will have with our surrogate. So we're still anonymous until we decide to reveal ourselves. So we have an anonymous email account where we can exchange messages.
Can you guys share, sort of a pearl or two of wisdom with the hopeful dads and moms that are in the audience? Something you would have done differently, just a word of advice? Anybody?
I guess so. Our journey went really well, and we were really happy with everything. So we were happy with. So I know in Thailand, perhaps compared to the US, there's more concern around various aspects of it, and you might not have all of that support there. But we were very happy with how everything went. Now, I think might be different to the US, but we had to put a lot of effort in ourselves, a lot of research. Although it went really quick, we spent every waking moment talking about surrogacy. How are we going to do? What are we going to do? Choosing the correct agencies and clinics and things like that, and going to the Facebook groups, checking everything online. We did so much of our own research. When it came to the decision to do a single embryo transfer, we'd looked at the medical literature, we'd looked at the academic journal articles about success rates and things like that, because that kind of support wasn't provided by our agency in Thailand. It was more of a bare bones service, and we didn't get that support, so we had to put a lot of extra effort in. And I think that really helped us achieve a good experience, and and ensured that we were comfortable with everything that was going on. I think we had to put a lot of extra effort into that, because you do, especially in certain countries, do get that bare bones experience from the agency. So my advice there is just, you kind of get bored of it, but you have to just spend every waking moment looking up every little detail you can online and things like that.
I suppose, using the US, we had an agency that did absolutely everything for us, from egg donor agreements to legal to absolutely everything. So that took away a lot of the stress from us. But then, you sit there and you're a member of a couple of forums, and you read all these horror stories, about people, not being able to conceive on 2, 3, 4 attempts, and you hear all these heartbreaking stories. So my only advice is not to get too hung up on all these bad stories that you hear on the forums, because there are a lot of good stories out there. So that's what I can say.
That's great.
That's sort of a similar point. I guess that we were, because of our negative experiences, and which are nothing compared to some people who go for like 10 or 15 years. But I guess, good things can happen. So you have to be a bit positive about it. During the pregnancy, we were all, we had a few bumps, and our surrogate was saying, it'll be fine, I can do this easily. So she was absolutely 100% sure that it would all go fine. And in the end, it did. It was all the quickest, simplest birth that ever happened. Allow yourself a little optimism.
What questions do you guys have? You're a tired group of people. 2-day conference, midway, almost done with the second day. Your heads are bursting with information. I know, you just want to have the baby. Karen, yay. Thank you.
Congratulations to all three of you, by the way. Got happy kids at home with great dads. My question is, did you start out the process choosing not to know your donor or choosing to know your donor? And at any time did you change your mind? And now that you have children, would you have done it differently?
So we always wanted an anonymous egg donor. And I don't think I would change that decision either. For us, it was more for the children to have a relationship with our surrogate. So that was for us the more important thing.
Okay.
For us, we don't have any relationship, any practical relationship with the surrogate or the egg donor. However, so we know who our egg donor is, and she knows who we are, obviously, and she is Australian. And although we don't actually, send her photos of the kids or things like that, we sort of have we know that we have the ability to contact her in the future if the kids want to. And we do have, for the kids, we have this lovely storybook that we made up, which includes photos of the surrogates and the egg donor, so they'll always know, and we've already been reading it to them, so they'll always know their story, and they'll have the pictures and names of the egg donors and the surrogates. So really for us, we didn't want, in the first instance, to pursue close relationships with these people. However, we did want to make sure everything was fully open and available to the children as much as possible, and that we would have the potential to engage in that contact if the children chose to later down the track.
I think our motivations were similar, that we definitely wanted a known donor, but I guess because this was like a donor we met through an agency. It wasn't sort of a friend relationship. So the reasoning, I think, that why we wanted to make a known donor is not because we, as parents, really want to have a family. Well, we may, but that's not our intentions. To head off any questions that the child might have as she grows up. So. And as I said, we're still trying to work out how we build some kind of relationship so that the child has that option, or not. So yeah, we're still working through that. But it's the same objective. It's not actually to include her, unlike the surrogate, who is a sort of part of our family. We consider her as part of our extended family. So, so it's for the same reasons.
Other questions? Anybody? Real life parents here. Rumen. There we go. I'm going to have to plant people in the audience with questions next time.
Congratulations, guys, inspirational. Just a question. Do you feel an extra sense of burden or being obviously same-sex relationship and then going through surrogacy? I just wonder whether you feel such burden, how you deal with it, because clearly your journey is inspirational and I'd like to hear about it.
So we've never had much of an issue around being same-sex parents. We haven't experienced any discrimination or anything like that. I personally think that I know there are some people out there, so occasionally when you read things in the media and things like that, you feel from those perspectives when they're attacking families that don't have mothers, I don't agree with a lot of the things they say, and there are lots of women in our family, in our broader family, around our children, and I don't think that they're missing out on anything in that sense. And I don't think most people in the community think that either. I mean, yeah, we did go in the newspaper and on TV and things like that, and then so you do get a few, when you look at the media, you do get some of the full spectrum of views and some fringe views, but in actual practicality, it's more often than not, you get people stopping you in the street to say lovely things to you, and when you're out with the two dads and the kids, and you do get strangers coming up to you months after, people said, months and months after we'd been in the newspaper, which was just an article in one newspaper, people would remember that apparently and would stop us in the street and come up and say how great they thought the story was and things like that. So we, in fact, sometimes it's a bit embarrassing because you're like, well, it's not, we're not that big a deal. We're just a family, just a normal family, and you get a lot of this positive attention that's kind of embarrassing almost. It's our experience. So
we haven't really encountered any, anything bad per se. We've had a lot of questions asked. Who's the mom, who's the dad at home, sort of thing. And there's also the odd question, we've got a son and a daughter, who's going to teach the girl, our daughter, all the girl things later on in life, sort of thing. YouTube helps, I'm sure, but we don't, it's, you just answer the question. A lot of it, it might be ignorance, but I don't think it's the bad sort of ignorance. I think, being able to talk about it very openly does help. At my place of work, I was very open with my employees. They were very supportive. I got everything that anyone else would have got. So for me, it's just face it head on. You do get the odd stare now and then, but if you let it worry you, then you've been defeated.
Yes, over there. Oh, I didn't see that one. Okay, we'll start there.
Yeah, thanks. So I was interested in your comment about you got everything from the employer that you would have expected. I don't know if you're from the ACT, so there's the laws in ACT, New South Wales, Queensland, where strictly speaking, it's not legal to do commercial surrogacy overseas. And so there's, in our minds, a bit of a hesitancy to ask for those sorts of things, whether it be maternity, paternity leave, baby bonus, whatever.
So I was very upfront with my my boss. I told her this is what I'm going to do, and she said, as your friend, I say do it. As your boss, I can't condone it. But she said go ahead and do it per se. Anyway, so work knew what was going on, and I put my application in for my paternity leave, and I got it without a question being asked. I got the return to work bonus that all the moms get. So again, HR was very open to the whole thing. I think just before the kids were born, they changed all the documentation, so they mentioned specifically same-sex there as well. So that was a real good thing for us.
Yeah, my employer was very good. So yeah, I didn't have that concern about the legal thing because I'm from Adelaide. So, but they were really good, and I got more than a straight male would have got. And under our enterprise agreement, there is maternity leave and there's adoption leave, and if you're actually a straight male, you aren't entitled to the full amount of parental leave. Whereas I got that full amount. It was just approved as a special case, and in fact, in our new enterprise bargaining agreement that's been agreed on a few months ago, there actually now is provision for, what do they call it, special parental leave. But they specifically mentioned same-sex couples and surrogacy as some of the reasons you might want to apply for that. So my employer was really good.
As was mine as well. I took paternity leave because Mona was the primary care, but there was... I actually only told my direct boss that I was doing surrogacy, but there was never any question that it was perfectly fine. So
we didn't look into the baby bonus. I think I was a bit nervous when we first got back, and we didn't really want to draw attention to ourselves in that regard. So that's something we just let fall by the wayside.
There's a question over here. Yeah.
I was just interested to hear the re-entry back into Australia experience for you guys, passports and visas, and that seems to be a bit of a grey area.
So we fretted it. I think, like everyone, we did a lot of research and fretted a lot about it, and in the end, a US passport. It was underwhelming. We were armed with, you know, documents and things, and they just waved us through. So maybe some people have a different experience, but we wanted to fight.
We had no issue getting back into Australia. Again, we came with US passports, so we had the tourist visa for the kids. I think the more worrying aspect was trying to get an Australian passport for the children, which again was a bit underwhelming. We got it so easily as well, so we had no problems on that side either.
We had to wait in Thailand for 6 weeks before we had our Australian passports. So then we entered under those Australian passports. That 6-week process was a bit annoying, and you know, the embassy made mistakes. They didn't put the correct paperwork in with our DNA sample, and then it got stuck at customs. And there was a few things like that made it take a bit longer than standard. But ultimately, you know, you just do what they ask you to do, and it will all get through. On the actual process of coming into the country, when we left Thailand, you know, they did ask us at the airport when we were sort of checking in. Like I think they'd almost checked us through. They'd sort of done both of our adult passports and like one of the kids, there was 2 of them, and then the second one. Then someone came along and was like, "Hey, what's going on here?" And then they kind of took us aside. And so you do worry a little bit when that happens. But we showed them the surrogacy contracts. You know, initially they asked us to. Where is the mother? Because the mother on the birth certificate is written as the surrogate. So, you know, where's that person? And can we call that person? And actually, we didn't have their phone numbers. I'm sure we could have got in contact with them if necessary. But then they looked at the paperwork and were happy with it. I think ultimately they were worried more about the other potentials for us absconding with the child that without that person's knowledge and things like that. If you know. We actually had a relationship with those women, and we were just taking our kids home. So once they found, you know, they read all the surrogacy stuff, they were okay. And then actually, entering Australia, no one even batted an eyelid. We didn't even have to show anything at that point because they're entering on Australian passports.
Yes.
So we will here Australian with this question.
1 second. Yeah.
So we all here Australian, so we have a question like whether we get surrogate Australian or overseas. If you would think now, like because you went to overseas, is there any different if you would decide to have in Australia? Your experience will be very different.
So for me,
yeah. So the question, I think the question is, if they had stayed and done surrogacy in Australia, altruistic surrogacy in Australia.
Should we go overseas or should we do that in Australia with that?
Right. So, well, and you can all comment on that in your own experience. But the reality is that in Australia, you have to do altruistic surrogacy, as you know. So there's not commercial surrogacy. So it is typically surrogacy with a friend or a family member, or surrogates from a pool of surrogates inside Australia. So it can be much harder to find a surrogate is the issue. Can you, yeah.
From our perspective, yeah, so from our perspective, we're from South Australia, and same-sex couples aren't eligible for altruistic surrogacy in South Australia. So we didn't have a choice unless we moved states, which we didn't want to. We have jobs that we're happy with and things like that. So we personally didn't actually give much consideration to that at all as a same-sex couple living in South Australia. So,
I think. We came to a previous surrogacy forum, and I just remember that there's just not a big amount of surrogates out there, so you could be looking for a long, long time. I suppose by looking in the States, you know, it was an industry that was a lot more regulated and a lot more transparent, and I suppose we really didn't want to have someone too close to home to carry the child for us, so we thought the best thing was to do it in another country where it was a lot more regulated for us.
Actually, before we went to India in 2011, we actually had a friend who, there was a long-term arrangement that after she had her family, then she would have one for Mona, for us. But that fell through when the time came. So, but we would have liked to do it locally. I guess there was an issue of time. As you know, time was progressing. I mean, we did end up using an egg donor, but initially we tried using our own eggs, so it's so that was becoming like critical. So I guess we liked a lot of things about the US system, and in some ways it's even maybe superior to the heavily regulated but maybe not as effective sort of rules and regulation that they have here. That said, and also it's more expensive in the US, particularly with the low Australian dollar, but as far as the clinic costs and the medical costs, they're probably very similar. I guess they're just the payment to the surrogate, and that's, I mean, that's a small part of the, you know, a minor part of the whole. That's the biggest single cost, but it's just one part. I think in the US we spend about 120,000, so, and I think about 20. So the actual initial surrogate, you know, surrogate compensation was like 27 or something like that. So, there are good things about the overseas experience as well, which aren't available in Australia. But obviously the cost, and also the greatest benefit is the locality, is the relationship with the surrogate that we would like.
Yes.
I'm actually just interested to ask what you said when you entered the countries. So each time that you came in, were you saying, "Oh yes, I'm doing a surrogacy journey," or?
No, we say you fill in the form and you hand over the green entry thing with, you know, all the squares checked, and we're coming home on an Australian passport. We don't need to offer any explanation, and our baby is coming on a tourist visa, and they never. I think there are questions of what visa you need to put on. We decided we'll just go with tourist and you know, argue about it later, but they never asked any questions. So.
Yes, you mean actually going to America, when you go coming into America?
Oh, coming into America. Medical, they didn't ask either. Medical treatment.
We just went in on a holiday visa.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think we did a tourist or holiday. When we were ticking boxes on something. But.
Right there.
I just wanted to ask Philip, at what point in your journey did you make the decision that you wanted the egg donation to be anonymous, and for what reason? I've found in this conference that there seems to be a lot of, it is a surrogacy convention, but I suppose coming into it, my brain, I sort of was thinking if I'm to have a child that I would want the egg donor, that would be a more sort of important factor, the egg donor, for my children to be accessible to them, the biological reason. And so why did you make that decision, and at what point did you make that decision? Was that from the get-go, or is that from your research?
I think definitely from day dot we wanted an anonymous egg donor. We didn't really want to have that too close a connection with, you know, someone's sister, or, you know, someone in the family. I didn't really want that. You know, I think families cause a lot of strife, and friends, and it can be very tough on a friendship. So I just really wanted, you know, pay my whatever money, get the eggs, and that's it, really. I just didn't want that extra grief that I've seen happen. You know, people say yes, they're going to do it, and it falls apart, and then friendships end. So we just thought, for just expediency, it was better to get an egg donor.
I just wanted to ask about, we had a speaker yesterday about, I think it was transfer of parentage. When you get back to Australia, have you guys done that process at all, or did you need to?
We haven't done any transfer of parentage process ourselves, so.
We haven't either, and to tell you the truth, I don't really care about that. No, I mean, luckily, both my partner and I are on the birth certificate of the child, so there's no third party on it. So, I mean, I've registered them at schools, I've done all sorts with that, and I've come across no question whatsoever. So it's not anything that I'm going to even bother looking at, to tell you the truth.
Yeah, we wanted to get it done, but it's just there's no simple path to do it, that we want to invest a lot of money into, or time. So as Philip said, practically there seems to be no issue with it. But of course legally there's you need to cover off the wills. The child it won't inherit because they're not your legal child, and things like superannuation and things. You just need to be careful.
Just a question about anonymous donors. Just in relation to when your child or children grow up and they start asking about their origins, have you actually thought about how you're actually going to answer that question?
No, I haven't thought about this part. We've got a storybook that we've put together. So we've got pictures of who the egg donor is. And we always thought, if there was a problem medically, you might need to get hold of the egg donor, and that's in our contract. So should we need to get hold of her for medical issues or something like that, we can still get hold of her through our lawyers. So I think we've got that covered. But the whole thing is going to be foreign for the kids. The egg donor, surrogate. So I don't see the greater importance of the kids knowing who the egg donor is. For me, it's the surrogate who's given 9 months of her life to carry them, and I think there's a stronger bond between them and the surrogate than really are the egg donor.
One more question over there. Thanks. I can see we're having a great ethical debate here on donor knowledge, but the one thing I took yesterday was when the three, and I'm just, with the greatest respect to everyone here, was the 3 children who spoke yesterday. I don't know who was here, but each one of them was so adamant that they wanted to know their genetic parents. I think that was one big message I took out of the whole meeting.
I didn't get that message. Did you guys get that message? I got a pretty mixed message. And
sorry, that's the message I got.
Was it the surrogate panel or the donor conceived?
They had the 3 children up there.
I know. Was it the three who had been conceived through surrogate? Yeah, because there was also a panel with 2 young adults who'd been conceived through anonymous donors. I think there's a bit of a mixed bag with people's opinions. Yeah,
and I think it's when we say anonymous donor. There's different levels. So although we don't plan for a relationship with the egg donor or the surrogates, we do have their pictures and that information available to the children, and the children will always know that they can pursue contact with those people. So and I think it sounds like it's similar with Philip, that he's not hiding it. There's anonymous where you're just completely hiding it and it's a secret where you came from, and then there's I wouldn't say it's anonymous. It's they're known donors but with no relationship expected, and I think that's a little bit different. And I mean, you don't know. Different people will have different desires. With our children, we don't know exactly what they're going to want to do. But I think as long as they know that there's options there available to them, I think that will help a lot rather than having this war.
I think Mark's right. There's issues people get very confused about disclosure versus going and visiting your donor. And one of the problems the adoption kids have had in Australia in the past is when it wasn't disclosed to them that they were adopted or they had donor eggs or sperm, that's when they had problems. And I think for you as parents, you need to be very clear that disclosure about the fact that donor eggs were used, and here's the picture and here's her name and here's where she lived, is much more important than ongoing contact with that person. And I think that's where the critics of surrogacy get very confused, and they think, well, they're anonymous, so that's terrible. But anonymous really doesn't mean that, as Mark's just saying.
Yeah. Good. We have one moment, so a final word from each of you. Something to share.
Yeah, just keep trying. We always were positive and optimistic, always knew that things wouldn't work. When you're engaging in things like this, you need to also realize you might spend $100,000 and end up with nothing as a result. You need to deal with that, but then be optimistic and just push forward, and then you're more likely to get a positive result like we have.
Philip, parting word?
I think I have to echo what Mark says. It can be a long journey, but I think there's light at the end of the tunnel. And I think it's, for us, we were, I suppose, a little bit quiet with our parents. We never let them know up until we were really, like maybe 3 months beforehand. I think the only advice, well, from my own experience, is to have your family more involved, because there was so many exciting times that we never actually shared with them until the very, very end.
Brendan, parting word?
None really. Our baby's actually here in the red pram, so you might have seen it.
Exhibit A.
It does.
All right. Well, join me in thanking these guys. It's not easy to come up here and share the intimate details and judgments and things that you've made.